Hey, how you doing, Xavier? We're gonna go ahead and look at some of your exercises today, starting off with a pin squat. Pin squat's looking good. It's looking really good. Not a whole lot to note on improvement. I like the breathing and bracing. I like the bottom position. Not a whole lot to touch up on. Probably two things I want to just throw out there. One, you are likely already doing, but I don't know for a fact you're doing it to your fullest capability because camera angle doesn't necessarily accentuate this detail. I'd be able to tell better in person, but be sure we're drawing a lot of attention to the lat engagement. Probably talked about before, lats are spinal stabilizer. If we do not engage our lats to our fullest capability, our spine is not fully stabilized, and then 12 other things falter in terms of mechanics in a squat. So just be sure that we're going through that scapular depression or pulling that barbell down and keeping that engagement throughout the entire lift. Not to say that it's a fault for you. Looks good, looks really good in that area. I just can't tell for sure we're doing it to our fullest capability. So good to just throw that in there. The second thing is I want you to fiddle around with how high you have your belt. Most individuals, and it's not really a set in stone thing. In fact, it's definitely not. It's very subjective. It's dependent upon how you build, torso length, maybe even hip structure. But you'll notice that most individuals have their belt quite a bit higher than you have it. The way I usually hold my belt and the way I usually describe it to people that have never wore a belt before is if my belly button is here, which it is, the very bottom of the belt should barely cover it. Most of it should be up here. And right now, yours is, if anything, the exact opposite. Again, not a bad thing. If you feel like you're creating good IAP, if you feel like you're comfortable with that position, stick with it. But I found that most individuals can build more intra-abdominal pressure and breathe into the belt better with it a bit higher, because that's where most of the inflation is taking place. So go ahead and fiddle around with it if you want to stick with your current belt placement. Not a fault, not a big deal, but you may find that you bring it up a little bit, try a few sets with it, and you actually like it quite a bit more. Conventional deadlifts looking pretty darn good. You kind of have a similar fault to me, and that is you are not the most patient when you lift, which is fine. For example, when I'm doing pause work for sumo deadlifts, when I used to do a lot of pause work, maybe it's a 3 count pause, just 1 inch off the ground. When I come off that pause, when I come out of that pause, I try to explode up as fast as I can, which isn't inherently bad, but sometimes I would lose position because I'm trying to go so stinking fast. And what I've realized over the years is that, well, it's not a bad thing to explode out of the hole, especially if you're an athlete, if you're a wrestler, if you're a football player, something like that. It's probably a better idea. At the same time, sometimes you get a little bit thrown out of position by trying to explode so much, trying to move so quickly. Like I mentioned before, some of the best lifters in the world, the best lifters in the world, pretty much across the board, move very heavy weight very slowly. They learn how to grind it out, move very efficiently. And that's kind of all about what neurological adaptations do for you in terms of strength sports and strength endeavors. So with that being said, don't be afraid to take it a little slower out of that pause. We kind of rushed the coming out of the pause portion of the lift just a little bit. We may have gotten just a little bit of wasted motion there. I used to have it all the time. Not a big deal. It's part of being an intentional lifter. It's actually kind of a good thing, a good sign rather, in terms of intensity that you're lifting at. But at the same time, ideally, we never get thrown out of position, of course. So something to be cautious of there. And if you don't know what I mean there, watch where your shoulders are, watch where you're grabbing the barbell, watch your hips, watch everything as you pause. So starts there. Now watch your first motion out of the pause. Do you see how your shoulders jump forward like that? And again, I know this issue very well because I used to have it. So watch one more time. You'll notice shoulders directly stacked over the barbell. And if you come out of this position after a pause and just move with great intent and just get used to the fact that it's going to go a little bit slower, you wouldn't have this issue. But because we're trying to explode so much, oftentimes the body will shift forward real quickly. That's exactly what happened. Just came a little out of position here. Watch one more time. Bam, just a little bit, and those shoulders jerk forward, and ideally that's not happening. So they'll put a little extra emphasis on our spinal erectors and low back, and obviously getting thrown out of positions is never necessarily a good thing. So not a huge fault, not a big deal, especially with load like this that you can handle pretty easily, but something to pay attention to in the future and be a little more patient with in the future. Conventional deadlifts looking good. Not a whole lot of complaints here. Yeah, real nice job there. Nice hinging. Nice touch and goes. Real beautiful. Probably the only thing I draw a little extra attention to, I saw it in the last set, I'm seeing in this set too, is 95% of the reps, I would say, with the exception of 1 or 2, or we're cutting a little bit short at the top rather than getting all the way up into extension or to a neutral hip and knee position. We're ending with a little bit of flexion in the knees, a little bit of flexion at the hip, and we're not kind of locking out completely. If you're doing sets of like 12, 15 reps, which I never program for people for many reasons, then that's completely fine. Not finishing every rep's not going to be a big deal because that's just a different training intent. But with sets like this, we want to make sure we're locking out completely, just because every single time I've seen an individual do this for an extended period of time, especially if it's leading up to a meet, that's exactly where they end up failing once they start getting into more maximal loading. So just something to pay attention there. Complete lockout will definitely be worthwhile. Sumo, I'm really happy with this lift. I'm really baffled, though. I'll let you know right now, I'm baffled that you are doing these in socks. If you're not sliding, not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. But I know for a fact I could not do as wide a stance as you're doing right now and not slide if I was wearing socks. Even if I was drenched in sweat, I'd still have that issue. So just continue to pay attention to those issues. With the squatting in socks, as long as you don't have a very wide stance and if you're going slow, controlled, and your socks aren't too slicker, you should be fine, especially if the material under you is some kind of mat. But with the sumo deadlift, I pay a little extra attention to it. I always kind of get a little cringy. I don't want to say cringy, a little nervous, I guess you can say, when somebody's doing a wide sumo deadlift in socks. I've seen it slip all the time when you're producing force in that wide a position, and it slips even a little bit, adductor tear, just like that, adductor strain at the very least. And that's a shitty injury to progress through. It's a shitty injury to deal with mid-training. It takes a long while to recover because it's a very low blood flow area. So just be cautious of that. If you're not worried about it, I won't be either, but I'll continue to mention that a few times, especially with this lift specifically. Your sumo deadlift's looking extremely nice right now. That's the one thing I just want to throw in there to get it off my conscience and make sure that that's not an issue moving forward. Yeah, so your starting position, far better than it has been in the past. Let's really watch this here. Yeah, so very upright, beautifully externally rotated, the knees and hips, or in the hips rather. And then nice little pause there too. Nice eccentric. Yeah, real nice there. Yeah, it's looking gorgeous, looking real good. And that was probably a good way to end with. I'm assuming that was the last week of the previous training blocks. It looks pretty tough. Looks like it's a good load. One thing I would mention, though, is that this week, the first week of a new training block, don't be afraid to take things a little bit lighter. I think I mentioned that in the previous update, but just making sure we're on the same page there, because I want to give your body a chance to decrease accumulative fatigue a little bit, and then also get used to some of the new variations, new rep schemes. But that sumo deadlift looked really good, all-time best. No complaints whatsoever. Really good looking. Sumo deadlift has came a really long way, so I'm thrilled with that. Like I said in the beginning, I always knew you could have a really good sumo deadlift, and it's coming along beautifully. Snatch grip's also looking good. I like the width from what I can see. Let me see. I don't know how far you are on the barbell. It's kind of a weird camera angle to see that. Just make sure, the biggest issue I see with these that drives me crazy is that people will go from this grip here with a conventional deadlift, and then they'll go snatch grip, and they go this grip here. That's not a very big change in stimulus. That's not going to be what we're trying to get out of it. So just make sure it's a pretty meaningful difference. We're going pretty much as wide as you feasibly can, to an extent at least. And usually there's a knurling mark on just about every single barbell on each side. I always like to tell people, like, at least going as far over that as possible, far beyond that as possible. But just make sure we're going plenty wide enough. The mechanics behind your snatch grip, though, look really good. No complaints there. Nice hinging. I like the fact that we're taking it pretty slow in the eccentric, too. Nice, neutral, cervical spine position. Yeah, no complaints here whatsoever. Looks really good. Last thing I want to discuss, like I said, first week of this block, let's take it nice and easy. We got plenty of room to progress it in the weeks beyond. Hopefully you have a pretty good idea of how to progress training on a week-to-week basis in a given training block. Usually about this time is when a client really gets a good grasp on it and knows how to do it moving forward. But if you have any questions about that, let me know, because it's one of the most important details of training, especially in the position that you're on right now. With your movement quality being really good, movement quality is becoming something that we have to focus on less and less. Of course, we'll always have a to focus on it, but it's something that's less urgent now. Now we're going to more specifically focus on the progression of load and intensity throughout a training block and really try to nail down that and make it perfect so you can get the most out of this in terms of strength adaptations. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Stay safe out there.